Hey, everybody. Before we get to this week's guest, just a couple reminders we wanted to send your way. First is follow us on our social media platforms. We are on Instagram, we are on TikTok, and in both of those places, it's the same username, deviant.podcast. Dan and I both do some stuff over there, so give those a follow if you haven't already. Also, we are on Patreon, which if you've listened to our stories that come out on Tuesdays, there are some things that we don't get to in those Tuesday episodes through the course of research, through the course of writing, through the course of sifting through FOIA documents and arrest records and things like that. There's some things we just can't get to for the sake of keeping the show moving. So what we like to do is we try to take some of that stuff that we get through the research process and we put that on Patreon. There are documents, there are photos. Sometimes we record videos to give you some behind the scenes type stuff. So what we do is we put that stuff on Patreon and we leave that there for you to see. So give it a look at that. That's at deviantpodcast.com. The best part, there is a free tier that is no charge to you. So give us a look at social, deviant.podcast on TikTok and Instagram and on Patreon. Now, as far as today's show, we've talked to a lot of journalists for our off-script episodes, and there's a reason for that, because journalists will level with you. They give it to you straight, and that's one of the things that we like about having conversations with those folks. And today's guest is one of those. His name is Alan Duke, and for a long time, Alan was a reporter and producer and editor at CNN Radio, at CNN Digital, and a large part of his news coverage was the intersection of Hollywood, Los Angeles, courts, crime, and celebrity. He covered Michael Jackson. He has covered so many different cases over the years that all sort of have that hot glare of the spotlight. And Alan Duke has been front row for a lot of that. So without further ado, here is our conversation with longtime crime and entertainment reporter, editor, producer, Alan Duke. Take me back to the beginning of when Alan Duke first jumped into the journalism reporting crime game.
Oh, it was a long time ago. I was 17 years old in 1974. I got a job at a radio station in Carrollton, Georgia, basically a weekend DJ kind of thing. And
what were you playing?
This was a country music station. My very first song that I ever played on the radio was Tammy Wynette's Woman to Woman. But because you had to play them on the old record players, right?
Right.
And they for you youngsters, they had two speeds, or three speeds really, but two speeds relevant to records at the time, 33 1/3 for the albums and 45 for the smaller records.
Yeah.
Most records you play on a radio in 1974 were not album cuts. We didn't do a lot of album cuts, but single records. But apparently the DJ before me had played an album at 33 1/3, and I put a single on there and started it. And the very first, I still have the air check, was Tammy Wynette singing, "If you think you got your man," and because it was at the slow speed. And then I had to, anyway, that was my debut into broadcast in August of 1974.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But what I did was at night, this man would come in to start working on the news for the next morning, right? Local news, very important in small town AM radio back in 1974, very important. So he'd come in and I would be there. And as a high school student, I would ask questions, watch him and say, "Can I help you?" So then he taught me how to make the cop shop calls. Call the Georgia State Patrol. Have there been any wrecks in the last few hours? Call the various police departments.
Yeah.
And that was the introduction. And then write something up on an old typewriter. In fact, I got an old clunker right over here, the old boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Write it up, get it ready, and have it for the newsman when he comes in the morning. He's already got some stories written.
Yeah.
So he mentored me and showed me how to do that. And I really loved doing that, and then got them to let me fill in doing news. And that's how it started.
Yeah.
Local radio. And I was in high school, and it was just amazing to me to be able to do that.
So what was the first big case that you covered?
Well, first of all, even before I ever worked in radio, I would go to the courthouse and watch cases.
Yeah.
I just would go and sit and watch cases go before the judges because I was thinking, wow, this legal thing is awfully interesting.
Yeah.
But I think the first trial was a federal trial, and it was actually a defamation trial. And it's so funny. I was recently going through some old papers, and I found my notebook, my legal pad of my notes from it. And going back, it was a defamation trial where a local doctor was suing a GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
Right.
No, excuse me. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation agent was suing the doctor because the doctor had been arrested. He was on the city council and all. It was really local intrigue. He wrote a book about it. I got the book on my shelf over here. This was in the late 70s. So it was really a lot of local intrigue, but it was a federal defamation trial.
Right.
And the reason that it was so fascinating was the defense lawyer in the case was a guy named Bobby Lee Cook.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you Google Bobby Lee Cook, I'm going to do it right now, lawyer, okay? He was a Georgia lawyer. He died 4 years ago. He's actually a friend of my mom's. But he was like watching Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
Google Bobby Lee Cook. Anybody listening now, Google Bobby Lee Cook, Georgia lawyer. The cases, he was like, and I saw him in that case. Then later I saw him in a murder case in Atlanta. He was one of those lawyers who could get a guilty guy off.
Oh my God!
On a murder
This guy's
charge.
a character.
And he's from a town near where I grew up.
Yeah.
But I think the love of watching a good lawyer is one of the best things about covering a court case. I can name a handful of lawyers that have truly entertained me when I've sat and watched a long trial. And fortunately at CNN, I did a lot of that. I probably spent more time in courtrooms in my career watching cases than most lawyers, unless you're just a plain out trial lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
I spent months and months in court in Los Angeles. Anna Nicole Smith died in Florida. And after her death, there was an investigation. And the conclusion was that while she was ill from a flu, that her breathing system was suppressed by a prescription drug.
Yeah.
And so even though that happened in Florida and in the Bahamas, the California Attorney General at the time was planning to run for governor. Jerry Brown. He'd been governor back in the 70s.
I was going to say, was that Jerry Brown? Because he was governor and then he's run for governor multiple times.
Well,
right?
he became the Attorney General of California for a while.
Yeah.
And when he was the Attorney General, I think he figured it would be a good move for him to jump into this case in Florida. It was not a good move, but it did get him attention, and he did get elected again as governor of California. But he made the decision to force a prosecution in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And the DA brought the case in Los Angeles. And by the way, that DA later ran for Attorney General and lost. Tell you more about that later if you want to hear about why he lost. But there was a lady, I don't know if you ever heard, Kamala Harris. I don't know whatever happened to her.
Yeah, maybe.
But she's the one who won the Attorney General's seat as a result of that. Whatever happened, I don't remember. But anyway, they decided to prosecute a couple of doctors who were Anna Nicole Smith's doctors.
Yep.
Also prosecuting her boyfriend lawyer,
Howard K. Stern.
A guy named Howard K. Stern.
Yeah.
I sat through every day of that trial for months and months. And the prosecutor for LA, Renee Rose, who ran for a judgeship and lost in the most recent election, I would never want her as a lawyer, and I tell you why. She was eaten up by this one lawyer I'm about to name, a guy named Stephen Sadow. Where have you heard that name for a lawyer?
Isn't he a Trump attorney?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
And I can even tell you how he became the Trump attorney.
It's so funny how attorneys, like, they all kind of run in these small circles. And
They do.
Pop up,
and I know the circles
years later. You're right. They pop up years later.
I know all of the circles over the last 50 years in courtrooms. I know all of the circles,
and they're also geographical, right? Like there's always cities where there's a handful.
Except Sadow is in Atlanta, but Stern hired him to come to L.A. to do this, and the reason was very smart. You may be old enough to remember the Gold Club trial in Atlanta.
Yeah,
it was strip club.
It was right before I moved down here, but
right.
Yes, yeah.
You also may remember after the Super Bowl, I think it was in '99 in Atlanta. Ray Lewis of the Ravens was charged with manslaughter, stabbing to death a guy outside a nightclub in Buckhead.
Are you going to tell me about Ed Garland?
No, I'm going to tell you about Steve Sadow.
Oh, right.
Steve was not Ray Lewis's lawyer.
Right, because Ed Garland, I believe, was Ray Lewis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lewis wishes Sadow had been his lawyer, and let me tell you why. Because in the trial, Sadow was defending Ray Lewis's buddy.
Okay.
Halfway through the trial, Lewis takes a plea and becomes a prosecution witness against his buddy.
Right, so Sadow...
Sadow takes this, and when Lewis has to come up to the stand, if you Google Steve Sadow, Ray Lewis, cross-examination, you'll probably find a transcript. It is literally in law books. This is, you hear, they teach this in law school. They teach this in law school, how Steve Sadow turned Ray Lewis, who was a prosecution witness, into the best defense witness. And it was just so classic and so smart the way he did it, that's one of the ways Sadow got his reputation. But what Sadow did to Renee Rose in Los Angeles in the Anna Nicole Smith case. You remember the result of that? You were working at HLN when that came down.
But I haven't thought about that.
Acquittals.
Yeah, all across the board, right?
Yes, except Christine Irosevich, who was the psychiatrist doctor, who had prescribed some medicines or hand-delivered, actually, some medicines to Anna Nicole Smith in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
She got a conviction, except it was a misdemeanor. It was a traffic ticket, essentially a $100 fine, something like that was dropped. It did impair later. Her medical license was suspended.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the result of the trial directly. But Sadow ate Rose for lunch every day, to the point that the judge, who was a great judge in this case, started hating on the prosecutor. And you never see that, but Sadow's just brilliant. And
so he flipped the judge, essentially.
He flipped the judge. He flipped the jury. Turned out that there was a scientist type on the jury who understood all this. Sadow pointed out that in California at the time, there was literally a law on the books saying it's illegal for a lawyer not to treat pain. If a patient has pain, you have an obligation under the law to give them the opioids that they need.
Yeah.
But the charge was, they did it under false names. But then why are you charging these doctors? They didn't create these names. So it was acquittals.
Yeah.
But it was quite a trial. And a lot of things. Were you working in 2010 and 11 with Nancy?
Yes.
On her show? Do you remember the video of Anna Nicole, with the clown makeup on?
Oh, yes. Indeed, I do.
So I was in court when all of that was played. But unfortunately, when Jane Velez Mitchell and Nancy Grace, those were the two shows at the time, big shows, they would show this, and I would be their guest, and I would actually be the one on there saying, this video isn't what you say it represents, because they weren't playing the full context of the video. And I was saying, she's talking to a 3-year-old. That's why Anna Nicole is acting like a 3-year-old. Not that she's necessarily drugged. She may be. But it's that she is at a child's birthday party. The child got some clown makeup as a gift. And to play with the child, Anna put the clown makeup on her face and talked like a kid to the child. It was actually sweet.
Yeah.
It could be interpreted, oh my God, she's out of her mind. Have you ever seen me play with my grandkids?
You kind of learn a lot when you watch these trials over the course of time. And what's funny is I've said to people before, I'm like, watching court it can be very interesting, but sometimes it is not interesting at all.
Oh, and yeah, it can be deadly, but
when you listen
that's
to doctors,
when you're sitting. That's
when
when you're sitting there doing other things on your
mitochondrial DNA and like the sequencing of genomes. I'm like, oh my God, my eyes are glazing over.
Okay. Well, let me stop you in that. Actually, that is very important. And that what you just mentioned is a relatively new development.
Sure.
You go back to the DNA days of of O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
And when DNA was first starting, I mean, it was kind of fascinating because we were just hearing about it from Barry Scheck, I think it was.
Yep.
And Dr. Henry Lee and all of those folks back during the O.J. trial. Yeah, it can be the scientific thing but a good lawyer will bring it around. And
certainly. When you think about some of the cases that you've covered, what are the ones that kind of you always kind of chalk up to, yeah, that one was one that I won't forget for whatever reason?
Well, the big one was the 2 trials involving the death of Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
I was on that from the very beginning. I actually snuck into the emergency room when they were still trying to bring him back alive on June 25th, 2009. I happened to be nearby and got the call and got there.
Yeah.
And from that point on, it was my story. and it's how I met my business partner who was working with Katherine Jackson. It's how I met my wife, who is now working with me. It's how a lot of things in my life happened because of Michael Jackson's death and the investigation and the trials around his death. And I was really very, very deep into that. And a lot of fascinating aspects. And there are a lot of people who were involved with it who I'm still in touch with today. So that was probably one of
I remember
the biggest.
When Michael Jackson passed away, I remember thinking, and I'm of the age that I kind of grew up in peak Michael Jackson world, right?
Mm-hmm.
When he was the biggest star on the planet. And because obviously when he passed away, he wasn't necessarily the star that he had been. Like, but I remember the release of Bad. I remember the performance at the Super Bowl, and I remember the moonwalk. And I remember thinking that in death, Michael Jackson's death, there's no way that his death will just occur and it will just come and go. Like, there will be something bizarre or intriguing about his death, just as there was about his life. And sure as hell, it couldn't have been more the case.
He became bigger in death, more profitable in death.
Yeah.
And which is which was one of the challenges. If you're worth more dead than alive, and the people around you when you died are the ones who profited from that, benefited from the increased value, do they become suspect, some way implicated? And that's where the second trial came around. That was the civil case, wrongful death case against the promoter, the concert promoter, and the people who were involved in that. And that was a fascinating trial. It was not televised, unlike the other.
Right.
But I was there every day and very much in
well, because I mean, if you think about like the last 10 years of Michael Jackson's life, there's the trial in which he's the defendant. There is his death. Then there is the Conrad Murray trial. Then there is the concert promoter. Like, the last 10 years of Michael Jackson's life, I mean, it's nothing but legal, and
the last 10 years of his life. Well, he was making some music, but he was nomadic.
Yeah.
After the acquittal in Santa Barbara County, he left the country, eventually coming back, spending time abroad, then spending time in other places like Virginia, Las Vegas, and eventually just in the last...
What was he doing in Virginia? I never would have guessed.
Living there. There was a resort type place that he was living.
Where in
He
Virginia?
stayed there for several months. A resort. I can't
Yeah.
recall the name of it, in Northern Virginia.
I asked because I'm from Virginia, and I'm like, where in the? I can't think of a place in Virginia Michael Jackson would have fit in. But,
I could reach over to my bookcase and
it's
pull
funny.
a book open and show you, but take my word for it.
Yeah, certainly.
But he was nomadic, and his kids who were young were following him. Remember, they were wearing the mask.
Yeah.
But he was nomadic, and then he ended up coming to Los Angeles to what we know as the Carrollwood home in near Beverly Hills, just outside of Homely Hills, I think it's called. A very expensive neighborhood where he lived for just a few months as he was preparing for his comeback tour, This Is It. And that's when Dr. Murray followed him from Vegas over to there, and for about 100 days was nightly administering the large amounts of propofol.
Yeah.
And which has resulted in his death.
Right.
Yeah. And if I could go all into any of that you want, but that was the biggest kick.
What do you think it is that draws people to not necessarily celebrity crime? Because I think those stories are intriguing to people because of celebrities, but like over the course of your career, like why people are drawn into stories of crime and crime news?
It doesn't have to be celebrity crime. You're right.
Yeah.
Celebrity crime is on a big level, but I think people become celebrities because they're crime victims or they're criminals. I mean, some of the characters that we met along the way, that some of the biggest stories that you worked on and I worked on, they weren't celebrities until we made them that. But what draws people to it, I think because, I don't know, I like a good crime documentary and series and podcast. My wife is obsessed with them as well, more than I am. I mean, she'll just listen and watch and watch and watch. Dateline, she's over and over. It's a really good question. Maybe different people have different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I think with a lot of people, it's like the soap operas. It's a soap opera. You know why? I mean, I can remember when I was in college, between classes, I'd go and watch Days of Our Lives. In the same fashion, somebody now will go and watch a crime podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just an ongoing story that keeps unfolding.
Yeah.
There's also the other part of what's happening now that wasn't happening 30 and 40 years ago, and that's cold cases. How many documentaries have you been involved with or shows that were about cold cases? Yeah. Well, if you were a crime reporter in 1980, wouldn't be a lot of cold cases. Not that they couldn't, there couldn't, but it's just the clues weren't coming out in the form of forensics, scientific evidence like DNA,
genealogy, and all of that
genealogy. The latest being, you were talking about the development of DNA now. I mean, I remember I was with Nancy Grace at one of the crime cons. I think it was in Nashville about 7 or 8 years ago, and they had just announced that through DNA they had arrested a massive serial killer in California. Which one was it? Up in
Golden State Killer.
Yes, the Golden State Killer. And had made an arrest because of DNA and family tree, 23andMe kind of information.
Sure.
And we just realized then that there's probably not a crime that if you want to solve, you can't solve now. And this is where I'd like to go with that. Detectives today, I don't believe, could survive in 1975. In 1975 or 55 or 35, if you wanted to solve a crime, you had to use shoe leather. Go knock on the door, ask questions, think about them. The Columbo type thing. I mean, that's kind of how they did it.
Yeah.
Which might explain why a lot of crimes went unsolved. And that's why we've got such a big basket of cold cases coming out now.
Yeah.
But where is that taking us? I recently reported a crime. I had a burglar, 2 burglars. I'm in a condo building, happen to be the president of the HOA. So I take it personally. We have 34 cameras set up around our building. I'm in Los Angeles. And we caught the whole thing as coming through. And our security guard, 24/7 security guard out front, called me and said, Mr. Duke, there's somebody breaking in. Well, I didn't think about it then. I should have said, well, why don't you go and stop them?
Yeah.
Instead, stupid me jumps up and goes and encounters them.
Yeah.
with my wife following along.
Yeah.
And there were these two like Beavis and Butthead. I swear they're the prototypes of Beavis and Butthead. Kids with a skateboard that use a skateboard to pry open a big metal door.
Yeah.
They came in and they were so stupid and I ran them off. Their security camera, I made a TikTok video of this, of me confronting them and them looking so stupid and chasing them down the street until one of them jumps into a car they had parked a block down and takes off. So the reason I'm telling you this is the police showed up 30 minutes later. My wife calling 911 was put on hold. Took about 10 minutes to get 911 operator. The police came up. There were like 4 officers who responded. They didn't bother to take a report. They didn't want any of my information, none of my pictures, nothing. Something was taken. They did take some electronics from a garage, but a storage room, but something that I'm glad they took. I now don't have to throw it away.
Right.
I actually hope they come back and get the others. But the police didn't want to take a report. So I went on the Nextdoor app?
Oh, yeah.
I went on that and I posted my video, and it's a pretty funny video where I'm sitting here commentating and with my 34 cameras and my cell phones. And I just do an 8-minute movie of the crime and the stupidness of these stupid burglars. And it gets such a reaction on the Nextdoor app. People start sending me information. I find out the name of one of these guys. I get his criminal record. I know his address. I have pictures, video of him committing another crime not far away. I go to the police station, LAPD, with that. Oh, we'll send somebody out to make a report. The guy comes out, finally takes a report a week later. I upload all this to their portal.
Yeah.
And I have not heard anything back. If they would make me a deputy, I could go out and arrest this guy right now.
Yeah.
But it's a burglar. They don't consider these burglaries worth arresting or investigating. So that brings me to the reason is because LAPD is hundreds of people short on manpower.
Yeah.
They don't have detectives to do that. That's why you get our area. When we had an outbreak of burglars in our area, we got a lot of celebrities living around here.
Yeah.
Right. Like one of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills lives near here. By the way, spoiler alert, the Housewives of Beverly Hills don't live in Beverly Hills.
Right. Yeah.
They don't.
Right.
And they're not housewives either, by the way.
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry to break your bubble on that, Andrew.
Oh, not burst my bubble. What is, and you're somebody that's kind of done this for a while, like what's the most important thing when it comes to, working in the universe where there is crime and criminal activity and kind of reporting on it? What do you think and what do you consider the most important tool in being efficient and good at that?
My approach when I moved to Los Angeles in 2009, I'd been with CNN for 20 years, and they said, we're going to move you to Los Angeles and you're going to cover Hollywood. Covering Hollywood is covering crime.
Yeah.
Because that was when Lindsay Lohan was running rampant. That's when Chris Brown was beating up people. Justin Bieber was just got his driver's license, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. People were dying in the Hollywood Hills in mysterious circumstances.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time at the morgue talking on the phone. I literally had the county coroner on speed dial. I had his number memorized.
Yeah.
And they knew who I was. I treated it as a small town.
Yeah.
When I came to LA, I realized that it's really a small world of lawyers, detectives, like you watch the documentaries about these crimes in LA, it's a lot of the same detectives and prosecutors and lawyers involved in many of them, especially celebrity stuff. But it's like I just treated it like it was just that courthouse that I was learning all this in when I was 17.
Yeah.
Treated it the same way. There were more judges, there were more lawyers, there were more everything. But it's just you get to know them and have relationships so that they'll answer your phone and they'll tell you secrets.
Yeah.
And they'll trust you with the secrets, that you don't use them in ways that you promise not to.
Yeah.
That's very important.
Yeah.
The other thing is being ready to just jump out of your chair or your bed or wherever you are at a moment's notice, jump in your Corvette and go to the crime scene. Get there as fast as you can. Going to a crime scene at the very earliest stages, essentially ambulance chasing, I think is something that really helped me, because there are a lot of reporters who never go. They'll wait on a producer or a desk to tell them what happened, or a press release is issued, or they just have to go to a location for a stand-up that looks good behind them that might not be relevant to the crime. But I believe go to the morgue, slip into the medical examiner's office and knock on his door if he's not answering his phone. Those are the kind of things you have to do.
Alan, this was a really fun chat. I enjoyed kind of just hashing through some of this stuff. It's
so much more we could talk about.
Yeah, but thanks for being with me, man. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.